In this video, you're gonna see us pull the engine, disassemble it, and clean it. So you guys haven't seen this Jeep in a little bit, but this video is long overdue. We are finally going to pull this engine and rebuild it. It has, I don't know, probably 200,000+ miles. We don't know the exact odometer because we've replaced it and it's been rolled probably. So we're gonna take this engine out, completely rebuild it. There has been some questions about if we should change the engine because, I mean, it's a popular thing to do. You get more horsepower, you actually can drive on the highway, but we wanted to keep it very simple and we liked it. It doesn't use too much gas and it still gets us around. There's enough torque with the gearing and everything. Also, if we're gonna upgrade to something modern, the axles might not hold. I mean, it probably could handle a V6 or something, like a light V6, but we wanted to keep the original engine in it. This is probably the simplest engine to take out and replace. There's not too many bolts. You just got to take off the radiator, the fuel lines, the exhaust, and a couple of wires and maybe the intake. But besides that, it's very simple. I mean, there's no anything really to remove. So we are going to take the engine out with a chain hoist. We're just going to hook it to a couple of trusses because we figure it's going to be strong enough and we don't really need a cherry picker in here. It's just going to take up some space and a chain hoist is perfectly fine for our application. But we do have to set both these up. We're going to use the transmission jack just to hold the transmission because the transmission in this Jeep doesn't have its own support. It's on the transfer case. So we do need to hold the front of the transmission up so it doesn't fall while when we take the engine out. So this is only a 750-pound engine stand. I have heard that this engine is kind of top heavy, even though the engine only weighs 400 and something, 80 pounds or something dry. So it's not like this, it's not going to be able to hold it. It's just, it's a little top heavy. So I've heard these kind of bend a little bit, or it works fine for what we're doing and we're not going to be on it for that long. So I think it'll be fine. So I'm going to set up the engine stand real quick and then I'm going to wait for my dad to set up the chain hoist. So let's get this set up. Now we got to put up the chain hoist, which we're just going to put right up there on the trusses. We are going to put like a 6x6 or something to lay across like 4 trusses. So we're not just putting all the weight on one. We're going to put it across a couple. So there's only a few things that we're going to take off. First, we're going to take off the grill because it's just going to be in our way. And I think once we get it up, we can kind of managgle it out a little bit if we didn't have this besides just going straight up. But then we got to take out the radiator, and then there's only like 8 bolts. I mean, there's 6 to 8 on the bell housing, 2, and maybe a bolt on the oil pump, or the fuel pump I meant. So really nothing, and then the carburetor housing, and then a few wires, and then it'll be out. So we're gonna take all that stuff off. I'll probably show you a little along the way, but it's pretty straightforward. Grill and then the rest of the bolts, and then I will show you guys us at least lifting it out so it's not completely just here's it on the stand. So All right, guys. So you can see that we tore down the engine a little bit. I did record most of it, but it all got lost to some corruption thing, and now you don't get to see any of it. But it's pretty straightforward. You know, lefty loosey, righty tighty, mostly a lot of lefty loosies. There's a few things that about this engine that I do want to tell you. When you take off the head, there is a untorquing pattern. It's usually just into a you know, around the edges and then eventually go into the middle. I'll put a picture on the screen of what it's supposed to look like. It's just basically opposite of the torquing pattern. So you could see that we ended with not taking the valves out or the camshaft, mostly because we needed to get the part to pull the springs. We have this tool now that is the wrong tool, but you could see that we did get one off. So we're gonna keep doing it that way. These springs are a little different. Just get like a flat bar or something and kind of pry up onto this. So, and then take the keepers out in between there. These ones are not gonna be as hard. These ones were difficult because we didn't have any way to really support the bottom. There is a tool that pushes on the spring and then wraps around onto the bottom to hold the valve shut. But if you just use that tool and knock the valve back up, then you can take the keepers out. It is kind of a two-man job because how it's set up on this head, there's that one valve right there, or the valve stem, that doesn't line up very well with it, so it's kind of off a little bit. This engine wasn't as bad as I expected. I was actually expecting like deep grooves in it because it was burning a lot of oil. Like we were going through probably a quart every 250 miles or something. So it was quite a bit, but it doesn't look very bad for burning oil. I mean, of course it looks very carboned up, especially under the head. I mean, the valve, if we have the valve, you can see, I mean, it was very carboned up, but besides that, I mean, it doesn't look that bad. We have the crankshaft leaning up over here. I mean, even that, there's no scoring on the crankshaft at all. I mean, no anything. So, I mean, just maybe a tiny bit right where the seal is, but that's not really that big of a deal. And then there's, I mean, light scoring. I don't know how many miles are actually on this engine, but you could see that there's light scoring on the side of the pistons, which isn't that big of a deal. I mean, it kind of just looks like they're discolored on the other sides and look fine on that side. But, and of course, the top of the pistons are very carboned up too. If your pistons are not marked, I don't know if you can see any of those numbers. You probably can see 4. If they're not marked, you want to mark those. These are directional, and the caps are also, I'm pretty sure with almost any engine, the caps need to go back on the exact same one and the same orientation. So we're not going to take this to the machine shop. What we are going to do, because these are not hardened valve seats, we're going to regrind the valves and the seats so they actually match, because we were having some popping at idle to on the exhaust. So we definitely know these ones are bad, or at least that they're sticking somewhere, probably with carbon buildup somewhere. But we're going to relap the intake and exhaust valves. We're going to rehone the cylinders, and then we're just going to replace whatever small parts that need to be replaced, you know, gaskets and stuff. So this is not really a full rebuild. It's kind of just like a cleanup, because you can see how dirty all this is. But we're not doing a full breakdown, take it to the machine shop. This is kind of a budget build and re-shining everything up. right, so we got the whole engine disassembled. Now we're gonna take it outside and start cleaning it. Sorry, the propane furnace or the whatever that is, blowtorch was on. So we're gonna take it outside with the pressure washer that we have under there and just hose everything off and get it all spick and span and kind of go through all the journals and all the pipes or all the holes with some, like, I don't know what they're called, the pipe washer things, pipe brushes. So clean it all up. Make sure not to get too much gunk in there because you don't really want to bore those out a little bit, or in here, just kind of clean it up just enough. So we are using brass bushel brushes to basically clean off any of the gasket surfaces. We are also using this on the head, which is a little controversial to do, but because we are not a high performance engine and we don't really need to, we're just going to use the brass bristle brush. If you were going to go for a higher performance or a more pristine engine, then you would go to a machine shop and get the whole top of the head decked, so make sure it's also flat too. But for what we're doing, just cleaning off with a brass brush is perfectly fine for what we're doing. Some key notes are to stay away from any of the bores, such as the cylinder or the camshaft or the crankshaft, because those can actually scratch. Even though this is brass and it shouldn't scratch steel, it still will scratch it just a little bit, and just enough to not be as good. We did check it for flatness, and we are little cupped. Not bad. It's only about a thousandth of an inch. So perfect for what we are going to be doing, because this is not a high performance engine. We're just trying to get back to factory specs with the power output. So we do have a couple things that still need to get cleaned. Mostly the stuff outside, like the generator and the flex plate. But besides that, most stuff is cleaned. We polished up the heads. There is WD-40 on this. That's why it still looks a little oily. We also did the pistons, and let me show you how we did those real quick. So on these, this top groove, no piston goes in that, but it got caked with carbon deposits, and I just got in there with a pick and just scraped and scraped and scraped until it pretty much looks clean. It's probably not perfect. I know you probably can see a little bit in there. It's not perfect, but it's way better than what it was. It was like actually protruding from the piston when I started with it. Then I took one of the old piston rings. This is a new one because I already threw away the old ones, and I broke it in half. And then with the factory side, I went in and scraped all the junk out in there. That is kind of another controversial thing because that is a cast iron piston ring, and this is an aluminum head. It does get the job done. And then I just go in and dunk it in the tank of soapy water or the bucket of soapy water and kind of make sure everything's going smoothly and looking good. And then I also wire wheel the top of the piston head, which probably also not an ideal thing, but it works perfectly fine. And the surface, I probably will get caked up again with carbon deposits, maybe a little quicker, but it looks fine. I also sanded it down a little bit with some 400 grit, so make it a little bit smoother so it's not actually like gouging anything. With the carburetor, we are going to completely rebuild it, so we didn't clean that yet either, but it's not that dirty, and with a complete rebuild, it's going to get cleaned up. So traditionally, when this engine gets rebuilt, you usually paint it red, and you can see that it's been painted red. I don't remember the original color. It's either like green or yellow, but it's been painted red and it's been painted black over top. But because we're rebuilding it and we don't really do stuff more or less to the standard, because you can see the Jeep, I mean, it's completely not really what you'd consider a classic restoration for it. We are actually going to paint this engine blue. This is just kind of our test. We thought it looked pretty good. I don't know how a whole blue engine's going to look, especially in a Jeep. They never usually did that, but I think it's going to be cool. I mean, it's going to stand out, and it's different than the red that most people spray it when they rebuild them. And then all the accent stuff like the generator and the starter and stuff like that is going to be painted in this bluish silver color, which I think actually looks pretty good. So this is not the last time that this engine is going to get cleaned. We still need to hone the cylinders or deglaze them. And then we are also going to grind the valve seats down a little bit because they were a little, rough to the touch. So we're going to grind those down a little with the lapping compound. So it is going to get cleaned one more time. But besides that, this engine's pretty much clean and we're ready for doing other things now. But other than that, that's going to be the end of this episode. Most likely the next episode is going to be honing the cylinders and lapping the valves. We're going to do that on the block, which, yes, because this is the flathead or half a flathead, we're going to do it this way. And then we're also going to do it on the actual cylinder head. The exhaust was a little bit worse than the intake, so we'll probably spend a little bit more time on the exhaust valves. But other than that, we're going to do both of them. But this is going to be the end of the episode. So if you guys did enjoy, or you guys have any concerns, stuff that I missed that should have been in there, then let me know, because I'm probably doing some of this kind of wrong. So just let me know. Comment, like, and subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.